The hum of the game console was the only sound Leo paid attention to. In the dorm room, Julian was in the shower. The spray cut off abruptly, followed by a soft voice calling Leo's name. Julian asked if he could possibly grab the pants from his closet, admitting he'd forgotten them. Leo was about to storm the enemy base, but he dutifully paused the game to get the pants. He thought to himself what a pain it was. Julian was always forgetting something, turning Leo into his personal valet. He briefly entertained the ridiculous image of just going in and scrubbing Julian's back for him. Julian's side of the closet smelled faintly of cedar and expensive cologne, a scent that matched his polished, top student persona. As Leo retrieved the jeans, the bathroom door opened. Julian stepped out wearing only a long white t-shirt, his long, pale legs exposed. He clutched the hem of the shirt, a bashful look on his face as he apologized for the trouble. His skin was still flushed and damp, his lips a natural red. He was the picture of innocent appeal, making it impossible to be annoyed. Leo's eyes flickered down to where Julian's hands were strategically placed, and he remembered the book's description of him as a versatile type. The image was jarring, like a delicate poet secretly knowing how to operate a tank. Leo handed over the pants and told him it was no problem, just a quick favor. Julian's face broke into a relieved smile, and he said he was glad Leo wasn't upset. Leo quickly assured him that of course he wasn't. Why would he be? Julian was the golden boy of Blackwood University. Brilliant, wealthy, yet gentle and approachable. People were constantly trying to get into his good graces. In a way, being asked for favors was a sign of his favor. When Leo had first moved in, Julian was the only one who had been kind to him. Lately, that kindness had intensified. He'd even started insisting on doing Leo's laundry, a strange, domestic gesture that left Leo's clothes smelling exactly like his. As Julian leisurely pulled on his jeans, the fabric sliding over smooth skin, his damp hair fell across his eyes. He watched Leo from under his lashes, gauging his reaction. Leo felt a flush of heat rise in his cheeks, a silent mantra of "don't be swayed" playing in his mind. He forced himself to look away, busying himself with his desk, and missed the triumphant curve of Julian's lips. The door swung open, and Caleb burst in, radiating heat and energy from a basketball game. His handsome face was flushed with exertion. His eyes immediately landed on the two of them, taking in Julian, who was still buttoning his jeans. A scowl formed on his face as he demanded to know what was going on. His tone was sharp, accusatory, as if he'd walked in on a secret tryst. Leo rushed to explain that Julian had just forgotten his pants after a shower. Caleb and Julian exchanged a look, a silent communication passing between them. Then Caleb sneered, muttering how disgusting it was. A cold knot formed in Leo's stomach. The insult was clearly aimed at him. Julian smiled faintly, the light-washed denim now covering his slender legs. He remarked that it was certainly better than being a hot-headed jock who only knew how to throw tantrums. Caleb's temper flared. He asked who the hell Julian thought he was talking to. Julian's reply was mild, stating that if the shoe fits, Caleb was welcome to wear it. That was all it took. The air in the room grew heavy, and Caleb looked ready to throw a punch. He dared Julian to say it again. A frantic thought raced through Leo's mind. Caleb was all bark and no bite, just jealous and too proud to admit it. Suddenly, Caleb froze. The tips of his ears turned a shade of pink, and he shot Leo a look that was a confusing mixture of anger and accusation, as if blaming Leo for seeing right through him. Realizing he had to intervene, Leo quickly grabbed Caleb's arm, urging him to calm down. He silently pleaded with whatever forces were listening, reminding Caleb that this was his future partner, and for the sake of his own happiness, he needed to learn some self-control. Caleb's muscles tensed under his hand. He whipped his head around, his eyes narrowed on Leo as he snarled, asking if Leo had a death wish. Julian let out a small, amused laugh and stepped between them, pointing out that Leo was just telling him to chill out and questioning what Caleb was getting so worked up about. Leo was completely baffled as to how he'd become the target. Caleb shoved Julian's hand away, telling him to get lost and stop pretending to be the good guy. He then turned his glare back to Leo, his hand shooting out to grip Leo's face, his fingers digging into his cheek. The pressure was sharp and painful. Tears sprang to Leo's eyes. Caleb's expression darkened, the anger in his eyes swirling into something more intense. He leaned in and bit down on the cheek he was holding. The shock and pain made Leo cry out in earnest. Caleb's voice was a low growl when he ordered him to stop crying. He told him if he knew what pain felt like, then he should try clearing out the garbage in his head. Leo protectively held his stinging face as Caleb stormed off into the bathroom. Julian's beautiful eyes widened in concern. He gently took a wipe and began cleaning Leo's cheek, murmuring about how out of line Caleb was. Leo was still in a daze, not fully understanding what had just happened. Caleb had always been volatile. He was the last to arrive at the dorm that year and had tried to buy Leo's desirable lower bunk by the window. When Leo refused, Caleb had made his life difficult, constantly picking fights. But one day, Leo had a bad cold, and his eyes wouldn't stop watering. Caleb, thinking he had finally made him cry, had awkwardly tried to comfort him, completely flustered by the sight of another guy being so fragile. After that, he treated Leo like he was made of glass. His words were still harsh, but he never laid a heavy hand on him again. He was like a territorial cat, hissing and scratching, but if he ever drew blood, he would be the first one to come back and apologetically lick the wound. Perhaps that was his charm. Later that evening, the dorm was about to go dark, and one person was still missing. Ethan, the alpha of their group, a handsome and wealthy rogue who was rarely there. Leo sighed, looking at the other two. One was beautiful and gentle, the other was cool and intense. It was a shame, he thought, that their supposed partner would rather be out sowing wild oats than be with them. He could only imagine how hurt they must feel. His guess proved right. When Leo got up in the middle of the night, he found Julian huddled in the bathroom, crying silently. The sight of him, dressed in white silk pajamas with one shoulder exposed as he wiped his tears, was heartbreaking. Julian explained that he was just feeling incredibly sad. Leo knew why. It was just as he had suspected. Ethan was a careless heartbreaker. Overcome with exhaustion and sorrow, Julian asked if he could sleep in Leo's bed. Without a second thought, driven purely by sympathy, Leo agreed. It was only when they were lying in the narrow bed that the reality of the situation hit him. He had just invited the alpha's lover into his bed. Julian was wearing shorts, and Leo could feel one of his long, cool legs wrapped around his own. In the moonlight filtering through the window, Julian's face was an ethereal, alluring sight. Leo's throat went dry. The air conditioner was set low, and Julian murmured that he was cold, asking if Leo would hold him. Leo was torn. He couldn't possibly make a move on another man's partner. He knew Ethan would metaphorically kill him. Sensing his hesitation, Julian's expression fell. He whispered that Ethan had so many people in his life, and he felt so alone. He then asked if Leo could just pretend to be him just for a little while. His eyes were wide and pleading. Leo felt a wave of relief. It seemed Julian was still devoted to Ethan. And since Ethan was being a jerk, lending a shoulder seemed like the least he could do. He gave a small nod. Julian's lips curved into a smile, and he leaned in, pressing his mouth to Leo's. Leo's mind went blank. The soft, warm pressure was overwhelming. Under the pale moonlight, Julian shifted, pressing him down into the mattress as the kiss deepened. It was a slow, deliberate exploration, skillful and confident. Leo made a muffled sound of protest and tried to push him away, but Julian was surprisingly strong. Something hard pressed against his thigh, and he froze, the image of the poet with a tank flashing in his mind again. After a long moment, Julian pulled back, pecking his lips one last time. He whispered that he wouldn't just borrow a shoulder, but a kiss as well. Leo was still reeling from the shock as Julian curled up against him, falling asleep with a contented sigh. He soon realized Julian was using him as a stand-in. He would frequently initiate contact under the guise of missing Ethan. If Leo refused, Julian's eyes would well up with tears, and he would bargain his way down from a kiss to a hug, or from a hug to just holding hands. Julian knew exactly how to play the victim to get what he wanted, and as long as it didn't involve kissing, Leo found it hard to say no. He'd been promoted from background character to emotional support substitute. After a late-night class, Julian tried to take his hand to walk back to the dorm. Leo pulled away, insisting it wasn't right and he could walk by himself. Julian looked at him with wounded eyes, asking if Leo hated him now, questioning if they weren't good friends anymore. Leo felt his resolve crumble and let him take his hand. As they reached their dorm room, Leo sensed something was off. Someone was inside. Caleb had skipped class for basketball practice. That left only one person, Ethan. A jolt of panic shot through Leo. He quickly dropped Julian's hand and pushed the door open, forcing a laugh and announcing his return far too loudly. Ethan turned to look at them. Julian greeted him calmly, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Ethan gave a non-committal grunt in reply. Panicked that Ethan might have seen them, Leo made a hasty escape, declaring that he was going to take a shower first. Inside the bathroom, he leaned against the door, his heart pounding. When he emerged, all three of his roommates were there. Caleb was on the floor, doing his pre-shower workout shirtless. His broad shoulders and toned muscles flexed with each push-up. Noticing Leo's gaze, he seemed to push himself harder, a clear display of masculine pride. Leo knew he was showing off. The thought popped into his head unbidden. What a waste of effort. He could do 1,000 of those and he'd still be the one on the bottom. Caleb's arms trembled, and his face nearly hit the floor. He abruptly stopped and shot Leo an irritated glare. Leo looked away, feigning innocence, and turned his attention to Julian and Ethan. They were huddled over Julian's laptop, their proximity creating a palpable, charged atmosphere. His brain supplied another unhelpful commentary. The happy couple sharing an intimate moment. They could just kiss already. He wouldn't look, he promised. The quiet discussion over the laptop ceased. Both of them turned to stare at him, their expressions a mix of restraint and simmering anger. A chill ran down his spine. The fear of being caught as Julian's substitute lover was suddenly very real. Julian was the school's star student, set to speak at an award ceremony for winning a national math competition. Leo was in the audience with Caleb when a message called him backstage. As the auditorium filled up, Julian cornered him by a window, kissing him with a desperate, consuming hunger. Leo's head was spinning, his lips numb. He finally managed to push at Julian's mouth, gasping that he had promised he wouldn't kiss him again. Julian just smiled, completely satisfied. He told Leo to wait for him there and not to forget his gift. Leo had promised to get Julian a silver ring he'd seen online as a prize for his win. It was a strange request, but Leo had agreed. After Julian left, Leo turned to leave, only to find Ethan standing at the end of the hall, watching him. Tall and imposing, he leaned against the wall, one hand in his pocket. Leo's blood ran cold. He was caught. Ethan walked toward him, each footstep echoing like a death knell. The thought screamed in his head. This is it, he's going to kill me. Ethan paused, his expression unreadable. He asked coldly if Leo and Julian were a thing and for how long. Leo shook his head frantically, stammering that it was a misunderstanding, that there was nothing between them. Ethan's eyes darkened as he leaned in close, his voice low and devoid of warmth. He asked if Leo was afraid of him. His sheer size was intimidating, and Leo felt like a cornered animal. He wanted to nod but couldn't move, managing only a choked, unconvincing denial. His mind raced. Ethan was notoriously possessive. If he thought Leo was after Julian, he was dead. Ethan seemed to understand his fear. He straightened up and told Leo that if he wanted to live, he had to stay away from Julian. He then added that Leo also had to do one more thing for him, something he would reveal later. Leo agreed to everything, desperate to escape. Back in his seat, he was still shaken. Caleb nudged him, asking where he'd been. Leo mumbled something about the bathroom and asked if Julian was done speaking. On stage, Julian was the epitome of grace, but when their eyes met, he offered Leo a small, knowing smile. The crowd swooned, but Leo just felt a fresh wave of panic, Ethan's echoing in his ears. He turned to Caleb and asked where he was going after this, begging to tag along. Sticking with Caleb seemed like the safest bet. Caleb looked surprised but pleased, a smirk playing on his lips as he agreed. They left together right in front of Julian. Leo felt a pair of eyes burning into his back and chanced a look over his shoulder. Julian's expression was icy. Leo grabbed Caleb's hand and practically dragged him out of the building. Caleb, trying to hide his grin, told him to slow down. He ended up at Caleb's birthday party. It was a lavish affair at a private club, full of other wealthy kids. Ethan was there, his brow furrowing when he saw Leo. During the gift-giving, one guest presented Caleb with the keys to a brand new sports car. Leo's eyes widened at the sight. It was a stunning machine. Caleb, however, seemed unimpressed, remarking that it wasn't as nice as his own custom car, but telling a servant to take it anyway. He draped an arm over Leo's shoulders and whispered that he'd show him his real car sometime. Leo suddenly felt small and poor, having come with no gift at all. Someone noticed and called him out, teasing that Caleb's supposed best friend had shown up empty-handed. Caleb's good mood soured, but he defended Leo, telling the guy to shut up and that his friendship was more important than any gift. But Leo could see the disappointment in his eyes. On impulse, he pulled the small box from his pocket. It was the ring meant for Julian. Caleb's expression shifted from annoyance to pure, unadulterated joy. He took the box, a blush creeping up his cheeks as he opened it. Without hesitation, he slipped the silver ring onto his ring finger. It was a perfect fit. The crowd cheered. Ethan watched from across the room, his gaze like chips of ice. Caleb leaned in close to Leo's ear and whispered that he hadn't realized Leo felt that way, and that giving him such a thing in front of everyone was a bold move. Leo tried to protest, to explain the misunderstanding, but Caleb just hushed him, saying he'd already accepted. He then pressed a firm kiss to Leo's forehead. The room erupted in whistles, but all Leo could feel was Ethan's stare, boring a hole through him. He escaped to the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face. When he turned from the sink, Ethan was there, locking the door behind him. His voice was dangerously quiet. He said that he'd told Leo to stay away from Julian, and instead, he'd latched onto Caleb. Leo tried to explain that it was all a mistake, but Ethan cut him off, asking if he'd considered what Julian would do when he found out. The thought made Leo's stomach clench. Ethan then offered to help him. Leo was wary. Ethan explained that Leo was friendly with everyone in the dorm except him, and that it was his turn now. Before Leo could ask what he meant, Ethan laid out his terms. He wanted Leo to break things off with the other two and be with him exclusively. Leo was so stunned he refused without thinking. The idea was absurd. Ethan was known for being fickle. This was probably just another game to him. The party ended, and the three of them drove back to campus in Ethan's car. Leo was a nervous wreck. When they opened the dorm room door, Julian was waiting. His gaze, initially warm, turned to ice when he saw the ring on Caleb's hand. Ethan dropped a drunken Caleb onto his bed and disappeared into the shower, leaving Leo to face the music. Julian's voice was quiet but sharp. He asked for an explanation. Leo, knowing he was cornered, decided to just let him believe the worst. He said it was exactly what it looked like. A flicker of hurt crossed Julian's face. He confessed that he thought Leo was just mad at him from earlier, but he hadn't thought Leo would discard him so completely. He asked what Caleb had that he didn't, that Leo would give his gift to him instead. Leo felt a pang of guilt but pushed it down, reminding Julian that there was never anything between them in the first place, and now that Ethan was back, their little arrangement was over. Julian stared at him, stunned. He asked if all this time, Leo hadn't felt anything at all. Leo forced himself to say no, that he could never like him. Julian's eyes filled with tears, and he turned away, his voice thick with emotion as he said that he understood, that he wouldn't bother him anymore. Seeing him cry made Leo's chest ache, but he stood frozen, unable to offer any comfort. Julian kept his word. A wall of ice went up between them. In his place, Caleb was a constant presence, sitting beside Leo in every class. Leo asked him why he bothered coming when he never paid attention. Caleb just grinned, pinching his cheek and saying he was there to be with him, his boyfriend. The title was something Leo had been railroaded into accepting. After Caleb had sobered up from his party, Leo had tried to explain about the ring, but he couldn't bring himself to say it was meant for Julian. His stammering was misinterpreted as shy affection, and one lie had snowballed into another. Now, Julian sat in the row in front of them, but as soon as he heard their voices, he would get up and move to the other side of the lecture hall. After class one day, Leo was waiting for Caleb at the basketball court and went to buy a drink. He tripped on the way, scraping his knee. On his way back, he ran into Julian and Ethan. Julian met his eyes for a second before looking away. Ethan glanced at his bleeding knee and then at him, asking if he was dating Caleb. Leo didn't know how to answer. His mind was a mess. He knew he had to break it off with Caleb soon. Ethan seemed to read his thoughts, advising him to do it quickly before things got messy. The ring was a time bomb. As they walked away, Ethan suddenly stopped and came back. He was holding a bottle of antiseptic and some bandages. He knelt without a word and began cleaning the wound, his touch surprisingly gentle. He asked why Leo didn't take care of himself, if he was doing it on purpose to make people worry. Leo felt a strange warmth spread through him. He mumbled his thanks and then, foolishly, asked where Julian was. Ethan's hands stilled, his jaw tightening. He looked up, his dark eyes intense, and asked if Julian was all Leo ever thought about. He said the reason Julian wasn't here was because he didn't care if Leo was hurt or not. He told Leo that it was obvious neither relationship would work. Once Caleb found out the truth about the ring, his temper would be explosive. Ethan's final words were a quiet, chilling promise. Only he could protect Leo. His meaning was clear. Ethan wanted him as some sort of revenge against Julian. A bitter thought formed. He's not in love with Julian. He just wants to use me to punish him. Ethan's face went rigid, a vein pulsing in his forehead. He told Leo to think about it. If Leo agreed, he would give him anything he wanted. The time bomb detonated sooner than he expected. He returned to the empty gym to find Caleb sitting on the bleachers, staring at the ring in his hand. A terrible premonition washed over Leo. Caleb had found the inscription inside, Julian's initial. Caleb's voice was dangerously calm when he asked if the ring was meant for Julian. Leo couldn't speak. He could only manage a whispered apology. Caleb surged to his feet and grabbed him by the shirt, his face a mask of fury and hurt. He demanded to know what he was. Then, a joke? All he got was another apology. More than the fear of Caleb's anger, Leo was afraid of the pain in his eyes. He offered to get him another gift. Caleb exploded, shouting that he didn't want a gift. He wanted to know if Leo had ever, for a moment, liked him. Leo took a breath and told the truth. He said no. Caleb let him go, his voice flat. He said he finally understood. Then he told Leo to get out. Leo decided to move out of the dorm. He went through the official channels and found someone to switch with. He chose a time when he knew the room would be empty to pack his things, but Ethan walked in just as he was zipping up his last suitcase. Ethan asked if this was his decision. Leo knew he meant his offer. He sighed and said it was for the best. A chill emanated from Ethan. He reminded Leo that he still owed him a favor. He told him to come to his family's house that weekend. His tone left no room for argument. At Ethan's house, Leo was given a drink. The next thing he knew, he was waking up in total darkness. A silk blindfold covered his eyes, and his hands were tied. Panic seized him. He called out for Ethan, but only silence answered. He heard a door open and then footsteps. More than one person. He heard Caleb's impatient sigh and Julian's soft, melodic voice. A hand reached out, a finger hooking the collar around his neck. It was Ethan's voice that spoke, low and final. He said that Leo should have known this would be the outcome. He was pulled to his feet and led forward, then pushed down to his knees. The three of them stood before him. Ethan gave the command. Touch them. Figure out who was who. If he could, they would let him go. A moment of stunned silence. Then Julian's amused laugh broke the tension. He clarified that Leo could touch wherever he liked. And when he had chosen, he just had to say the name. Caleb added gruffly that whoever he chose, the other two would back off for good. Leo understood now. This was their twisted game. He slumped to the floor, defeated, and refused to choose. A strange sound escaped Caleb, almost like a sigh of relief. Julian said that was fine, then. That would be their answer. The blindfold was removed. Julian leaned down and kissed him gently. He told him this was a choice too. From now on, no matter who he was with, they would all be there. He would never get away. Years later, Leo found himself working at a top firm in the city. His boss was an infuriating tyrant named Caleb. He tossed a report back on Leo's desk, demanding a rewrite and complaining about his lack of progress. Caleb had grown into his power, sharp and commanding. Leo gritted his teeth and said he'd do it. His mind screamed insults at the man who was deliberately keeping him late on a night he had plans. He pulled out his phone and sent a text complaining about Caleb to the other two. Ethan replied instantly, offering him a management position at his government office, a cushy job where no one would bother him. Julian's message was full of sympathy, promising to cook his favorite meal when he got home. He was trapped. It was the night of his team leader's engagement party. He decided to blame his absence on Caleb and slip out at 5. Downstairs, 2 luxury cars were waiting. As he tried to sneak past, a hand clamped down on the back of his neck. Caleb's voice was a low purr in his ear. He asked if Leo really thought he could run, and if he had forgotten what night it was. The doors of the other cars opened, and Julian and Ethan walked toward him, their expressions making it clear there was no escape. In a moment of sheer desperation, Leo bit Caleb's hand and ran. He shouted an apology over his shoulder, telling them to have a nice night together. He didn't get far. They caught him, took him to the party just long enough to drop off a gift, and then dragged him home. The bed was covered in roses. A wave of exhaustion washed over him. He asked weakly if they could please just talk about this. 3 voices answered in perfect unison. No.